And so it's kind of when Malachi finishes, there's a big pause. And so it is kind of pivotal for that reason. It ends the Old Testament, begins the New Testament. Malachi, the name, means my messenger. And so, you can kind of look as my angel, my messenger, kind of, it has those kind of connotations just for the word, because many angels in the Bible were messengers that would come to talk to the people and give them information. And so Malachi is that kind of a thing. And so it starts out by talking about a discussion with a kind of a theoretical discussion, but God kind of speaking to them through Malachi and discussing some issues. And so it starts out with the burden of the word of the Lord to Israel by Malachi. In other words, Malachi is saying that I have this burden, I have this thing to carry, and I am bringing God's message to you. And it starts out by saying something that they have to kind of comprehend. It says, I have loved you, says the Lord, yet you say, wherein hast you've loved us? And it was not Esau, Jacob's brother, said the Lord, yet I love Jacob. And so he didn't pick Esau, he picked Jacob. And so he's telling him, you are the people that I have chosen. And he said, and I hated Esau and laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the dragons of the wilderness. And so it sounds like harsh, but it really also was not just God choosing Jacob over Esau, but Esau chose to be not with God. And so it was a dual thing that created quite a problem. And remember, there was a confrontation years later with these brothers. Jacob was running, and he needed he had an army behind him, and actually Esau provided that shelter. And so that was an interesting deal. But all of the trouble between these brothers was so strong that the people were afraid, because they're saying, oh my gosh, what's ahead of us is Esau's land, and what's behind us is his army. We're trapped. But Esau was gracious and let him do that. So it's one of those kind of issues that gets interesting, but it also, if I'm not mistaken, I'm doing this off the top of my head, but if I'm not mistaken, that was the line of, if you kind of get through it, that is also kind of in the breaks of the line between, you've got the Muslims and the Christians. And so there's kind of that kind of connotation in there as well. Whereas Edom said that Edom is Esau's territory. We are impoverished, but we will return and build the desolate places. Thus said the Lord of hosts, they shall build, but I will throw down, and they shall call them the border of the wickedness, and the people against whom the Lord hath indignation forever. So he's mad. And your eyes will see, and ye shall say, the Lord will be magnified from the border of Israel. And so he's, and you're kind of getting into some things about some context for the people. He said, a son honors his father, and a servant his master. If then I be a father, where's my honor? So he's asking them. For the people of Israel, if I'm your father, where's my honor? Why aren't you doing that? And if I be a master, where's my fear? Because you fear your master. You work because you're afraid they're going to do things to you. And so that he's actually using that as well. So the Lord of hosts unto you, O priests that despise my name, and you say, wherein have we despised your name? Now let me back up just a little bit too. There is a term that is used in Malachi many, many times, and it's something that if you're working on translating it, after a while you just kind of blow through it and see it and go through it, because the term is Yahweh Sabaoth, which means Lord of hosts. And so he is called the Lord of hosts, and the hosts being what we would consider, the heavenly being, the heavenly angels and everything else that go with that. And so he is the Lord of hosts, Lord of, kind of like saying he's the Lord of a heavenly army, or whatever you really want to kind of put with that. But I want to just say that even his name means like a tremendous number, a large group, a big thing. And so it is said many times, and like I said, you can kind of get to where you just kind of forget it, but you need to remember it's in there. Because he said, Yahweh Sabaoth. And then they say, where have we despised your name? And he says, you offer polluted bread upon my altar, and you say, wherein have we polluted thee? In that you say, the table of the Lord is contemptible. So there was a tradition in the Jewish faith with a table at the temple that had what was called the showbread, and it was baked, it was left there. And it was not something that the priests ate or anything else. It was more of a symbol, probably even dating back a little bit to manna from the exile. And the other thing that was funny, I just recently saw a church, and they used the name manna in their title. And I got a little tickled. I'm driving and I read that, and I got a little tickled. I think it was like Manna Fellowship Church or something like that. And I thought, great ideas, but you're missing something, and this is what gets funny. The term manna, if you break it down into the Hebrew, what does manna mean? Manna literally means, what is it? Because when they got manna from heaven, whatever that was, and there are a lot of theories and whatever, but whatever manna was that they could eat and provided their needs, the people looked at it and said, manna, what is it? But they ate it and they did all that, but it still, the name still means, what is it? So that fellowship church is, what is it, fellowship church? You know, I just get a little tickled by that, because I'm like, you know, what is it? And so, you know, they're trying to say this is who we are, but then you're, well, what are you? They're putting it in their sign. But they talk about the showbread, and remember the other thing about the showbread that we run into is that David, who was on the run at one point, he actually ate the showbread in the temple to survive, and he caught all kinds of grief and flack for that. He's not supposed to be doing that. He's not even supposed to be there. He's not a priest. He's all that stuff. And so it's kind of one of those things that, you know, there's a lot of importance to that bread and to that table, and God's basically saying you pollute it, which is interesting, because I don't think that since David was God's chosen, I don't think that God was upset with David for eating the showbread, but he's mad at these guys. So I just think that's funny, some of the little pieces of that we go through here. But then when he goes forward and he gets into, like, you know, kind of really putting his thumb down and saying, I'm not happy with you because of these things. And so he's now listing some of his grievances. And he says, and if you offer the blind for sacrifice, is it not evil? Because you're bringing an animal to be sacrificed that's blind, and that is not a pure animal. That is not, you know, that's damaged goods. Why are you doing this? And if you offer the lame and sick, you know, if you bring an animal that's lame, or look, you're worried about this one going to die anyway, then let's just take it to be sacrificed on the altar. Is that kind of the word that I think that we start using a lot, and I really like, and it's a way to reassess your world in some ways, is first fruits. Are you bringing God the best? Are you bringing him the first fruits? Or are you bringing him the leftovers? Are you bringing him, you know, like I said, with the sick animals, they're like, well, they're probably going to die anyway, take them to the temple. As opposed to say, no, this is our best and this is our finest. And this is what we bring to God. And so I think that that's one of those things, too, that you can look in your daily life. Are you bringing God your first fruits? Are you bringing him the leftovers? Are you tithing quickly off of what you have? Are you tithing over what's left over at the end? And so I think that that's something that we need to assess as well. You know, I will tell you that I got, and I totally, you know, it certainly has made an impact on me, and I get it, and I had to reevaluate and everything, but we were planning a trip to Mexico for missions, just crossing the border. And so people in church brought medications. And so if you think about it, you know, yeah, they may be expired, like it may say expired April, but let's face it, most medications still have a life beyond that. I mean, it's not like you take it April, you know, May the 1st that it's going to kill you, or it's so degraded. The medicines are still good for a longer period of time. It's just that that's when they expire. But we thought we were doing God's work, crossing the border, taking medicines to people in Mexico, and we got stopped by a border guard. and he wouldn't let us bring the expired stuff in. And he said, take this back. You're not taking this to the people of Mexico. And several of our people were, because we had to go back and whatever. And they were like, yes, but we're trying to. And I said, yeah, but if you really think about it, we're not bringing them first fruits. So I stopped doing mission trips with anything that was not first fruits, because it really was. I mean, like I said, our thoughts were good. Our hearts were in the right place. People were more than happy to donate their medicines that were going to be expired or expired. But if you really look at it, I shouldn't have been doing it. And so that had an impact on me to kind of think through what we're doing. Are we bringing those people first fruits or not? So, but anyway, he's kind of getting them. And he said, is it not evil? And then he goes into it. He kind of puts it in some real terms and real world for them. And he's talking still about this animal, whether it's blind or lame or sick. He said, offer it now unto your governor. Will he be pleased with you or accept your person? Said Yahweh Sabaoth, Lord of hosts. In other words, will he accept you to give him this thing? He will be offended. So why isn't God offended? So I think he's really landed on. It's kind of funny just how this dialogue is going, and he's making it very clear. And now I pray you, beseech God that he will be gracious unto you. This has been by your means. Will he regard your person, said the Lord of hosts. In other words, he's a bigger governor than your governor, and so how's he going to be looking at you? And you need to be praying that he is going to accept you. Who is there among you that would shut the doors for nothing? Neither do you kindle fire on mine altar for naught. He said, in other words, you're not wasting your time by doing all this stuff, by making the altar and everything. But he says, I have no pleasure in you, said the Lord of hosts, neither will I accept an offering at your hand. He said, you've messed up. You've totally messed up. Now, what I think in the way, too, that's kind of interesting about this, I told you there's this 400, okay, I'm good. They've got this 400 years before Jesus comes on the scene and changes everything. And so this may be a way as well that I just kind of wonder, is this kind of what's the term when you kind of, you've got something that's to reflect the future. You're foretelling, or you're doing that kind of stuff. Predictions, yeah. You kind of wonder if this is kind of a deal, because he says, I have no pleasure in you, said the Lord, neither will I accept an offering at your hand. So is he kind of saying that, all this stuff that you're doing, and you have been doing, and whatever, this animal sacrifice and all this sort of stuff, and you've created. And I think we really do need to look at the temple. And let me kind of take a little detour, and we'll get back to this. But I've been to the Temple Mount, and no, the temple's not standing anything like it was and everything else. But I've seen the foundations. And I've walked the stairs and those kind of things. But the top is all gone. And on that site is now the Dome of the Rock has been built. By the followers of Muhammad. It's on that site. But what I gotta say is, if you just even looking at the foundation, the temple had to be an incredible structure. And when I say that, because they got rocks that are literally, go to the end of this bench and come back to about here, and then make it about this big, just to give you an idea of the weight of something like that. I can do that for you. The quarries around me, they sell quarry rocks. They dig the rock out, and you see them. Probably the easiest best place to see them is to go to the Home Depot, Target area, and drive on the access road and look to the right. They have built this entire wall out of these rocks. These rocks, what we call it, the quarry industry calls it 2x4. You have 2x4s, 2x5s, but a 2x4 is two foot, and then 4 foot long. Those weigh 2,000 pounds. 2, 2, 4. So each linear foot is 500 pounds. So a 2x5 is 2,500 pounds. I've bought some of those, and when I take them over the scale, sometimes they're not 2,500, they're 2,800. I'm just telling you, just begin with that. These stones are bigger in diameter and much longer. And I have to rent a machine to move them that will pick up, that kind of weight, 2,800 pounds or whatever. Can you imagine building this temple with human labor? It does go into the whole realm. I have not seen the pyramids yet. Maybe someday I'll get to see them. But it's on the scale of building pyramids. I mean, how they took those stones and put them into play, I don't know how they got them built. But the other thing that's interesting about this is that if you get the right tour guides and stuff, those stones have names. Because when we're moving those things, I guess, people were kind of like, okay, what are we doing today? We are still trying to get Homer into place today. We're going to still try to move Homer to get, I'm just joking with Homer, but whatever the name is, those rocks have names. But they're incredible, and they're part of the foundation. You look up at them and see them, and you're like, oh my goodness, who moved this stuff? I get amazed because I move stuff with big equipment. They didn't have it. So just even the foundation was incredible. But I guess what I'm getting into is that they had this temple, they had this structure, they had built all these things with it. We talk about that they essentially the cedars in Lebanon? They basically decimated the cedars in Lebanon because they used the wood in the temple. They created all the ornate wood, all the tapestries. The temple was incredible. And I'm just talking about the stones as one example. But if you think about the temple and you think about the things that go with it. So, let me kind of take a little detour, but I'll still get back to all this. But in Austin right now, they're talking about, I've been hearing on the radio, they're talking about creating a park in downtown, a green place. And the politicians feel like that, it's okay. We're going to spend, a couple of million here, a couple of billion there, but it'll be over 20 years, over all this stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking about a park in downtown. Yes, it would be great for the people that work there to be able to have their lunch and everything else, right? It sounds like a good deal. But as anybody knows, if you have a park, you're going to have police presence, right? You have to make sure it's safe. You're going to have somebody trim the trees, somebody mow the grass, somebody pick up the trash. You're going to be maintaining sidewalks. There's all these financial things that go with this park. And if I was in charge, what I would do basically is say, okay, why don't we do this? Why don't we let them make green spaces on tops of buildings that people can go to lunch up there, and then you don't deal with a lot of the same issues that you're going to have to deal with a park. But they want the green spaces, but they don't realize how much it's never going to be a profitable thing, really. It's going to be an expense. Well, let's talk about the temple now. For a temple, let's say you're going to have the temple. You got to have some of the same stuff you're dealing with at park. Maybe not the people trimming and mowing, but you're going to have people to clean it, to take care of it, to take care of the tapestries. You're going to have, now let's face it, they had this entire industry, if I want to use that term, and whatever, God don't strike me down, but they had this entire industry of sacrificing animals. They had an area, and I'm blanking on the name of it. They had an area that they would bring the animals into it before they even got to the temple. So people would bring in their sacrifices, and they would wash these animals in this pool and then take them to the temple to be sacrificed. There's an industry with that. Somebody has to be working all that. There's an industry that gets that animal in the temple. And then you're like, they're doing it for God. Well, guess what? A lot of that stuff was food for priests. Let's face it, there was a cut out of this. And so the other thing that we know about the temple is they had to exchange money. They would bring in their money from wherever they were and say, okay, I'm bringing this as an offering. And Or, let's face it too, sometimes you didn't travel with your animals, you brought your money and then you bought an animal for sacrifice, right? There's an industry there. But even with that, you're trying to buy this animal. Well, they had this whole exchange of, you had to take temple money that to buy this stuff, which means you had to take your US dollars to convert it into temple money, and then the temple money could be used to buy animals. They worked on the exchange rate. When I was in Russia, it's like the Russians. At the airport area, it was 8 rubles to the dollar. Okay, so $1, 8 rubles. I was talking to people, they said, you get interior, it's 50 rubles to the dollar. So it's an inflated thing to make their money look stronger when it's really not. So the temple is doing the same exchange. So you see, Jesus gets mad. He cleans the temple. Why? It's all this industry stuff. He's not happy with that. So back to this, what I'm wondering is this kind of a way that in Malachi, that Malachi has put this in here, and God is saying this sacrificial system is dead. I'm not taking your lame, your blind, or whatever. I'm providing Jesus Christ to be the sacrifice. I'm providing the best. I'm bringing Jesus to die for your sins. Because he says, I have no pleasure in you, said the Lord of hosts, neither will I accept an offering at your hand. So he shut him down on that. And you're like, oh, okay. From the rising of the sun, even to the going down of the same, my name shall be great among the Gentiles, and in every place incense shall be offered into my name, and a pure offering for my name shall be great among the heathen, said the Lord of hosts. So we have songs, from the rising of the sun to the going of the same, the name of the Lord will be praised. This is where that verse comes from. But he says among the Gentiles. This is written to the Jews. He's telling them, guess what? It's not a private affair for you guys. It's not Jews only. It's Gentiles too. And so he's foretelling, and I think in many ways, about what's going to happen. But you've profaned it, and that you say the table of the Lord is polluted, and the fruit thereof, even his meat, is contemptible. You said also, behold, what a weariness is it, and you have snuffed at it, saith the Lord of hosts, and you brought that which was torn, and the lame, and the sick. Thus ye brought an offering. Should I accept this of your hand, said the Lord? But cursed be the deceiver, which in his flock has in his flock a Baal, and vowed and sacrificed unto the Lord a corrupt thing. For I am a great king, said the Lord of hosts, and my name is dreadful among the heathen. Now, one of the things, just this kind of goes with me keeping sheep and goats, and I don't have a bunch, but one of the problems you can run into is if you don't have a male, you're not going to have any little ones. And the problem is, for some of these, they may be having to make faith statements. He says, if you got a male in your flock. So what is that going to be as a faith statement? Because if you turn that male over, you hope that he's already bred the flock. And so you're going to have to depend on God to give you offspring. Ooh, what a scary thought. They don't like that thought, but it's kind of in there. You just think about it. Otherwise he's got to find a way to get another male, or, work with a neighbor or whatever. But it's a faith statement to say, I'm going to sell my male. Because you better be prepared to get another male. And, you could get a male out of the offspring, and they weren't really into the genetics as much, and so the inbreeding is not an issue to them. To us, it is. We don't want to use the same male too many times and have them inbred. But for them, and maybe they'd trade with other flocks, and I don't know, I get it. But that's an interesting thing. He's saying, you bring this lame animal, this bad, sick one, he said, but you've got one in your flock. Why aren't you using this male that's for the sacrifice? Why should I accept that? I am a great king, said the Lord of hosts, and my name is dreadful among the heathen. They're afraid of God. And now, O priests, this commandment is for you. If you will not hear, and if you will not lay it to heart to give glory unto my name, said the Lord of hosts. I told you, Yahweh Sabaoth, lots of times. I will even send a curse upon you, and I will curse your blessings. Yea, I have cursed them already, because you do not lay it to heart. Behold, I will corrupt your seed, and spread dung among your faces, and even the dung of your solemn feasts, and one shall take you away with it. And you shall know that I have sent this commandment unto you, said, that my covenant might be with Levi, said the Lord of hosts. Now his covenant Levi was a priest, so he's kind of got that covenant with him. My covenant was with him of life and peace, and I gave them to him for the fear wherewith he feared me and was afraid before my name. The law of truth was in his mouth, and iniquity was not found in his lips. He walked with me in peace and equity, and did turn many away from iniquity. For the priest's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek the law at his mouth, for he is the messenger of the Lord of hosts. But you are departed out of the way, you have caused many to stumble at the law, you have corrupted the covenant of Levi, said the Lord of hosts. Therefore I have also made you contemptible and base before the people, according as you have not kept my ways, but have been partial in the law. So now there's a part where he's going after the priests as well. Have we all not one Father, have one God created us? Why do we deal treacherously every man against his brother by profaning the covenant of our fathers? It says Judah has dealt treacherously. Now you remember, you've got the tribe of Judah to the north. You've got, or did I mess that up? You got David, and then you got Judah, and the two northern kingdom, southern kingdom. For some reason my brain's not working. We'll just let that go. The Lord will cut off the man that does this, his master and the scholar, out of the tabernacles of Jacob, and him that offered an offering unto the Lord of hosts. And this ye have done again, covering the altar of the Lord with tears, with weeping, and with crying out, insomuch that he regards not the offering any more, or received it with good will at your hand. Yet you say, wherefore? Because the Lord has been witness between thee and the wife of my youth, against whom thou hast dealt treacherously, yet is she thy companion and the wife of thy covenant. It did not he make one, yet had he the residue of the Spirit, and wherein one, that he might seek a godly seed. Therefore take heed to your spirit, and let none deal treacherously against the wife of his youth. This is a whole deal against these guys pick younger wives and are committing adultery, and so they're getting the wife that he hates putting away. What he's saying by that sentence is, Jesus says, I hate adultery, so you're getting it the same way. For one covereth violence with his garment, saith the Lord of hosts. Therefore take heed to your spirit, that ye deal not treacherously. Now, one of the things is, hate covering with his garment. They're talking about taking the wife underneath your clothing and moving forward. You've wearied the Lord with your words, yet you say, wherein have we worried him? When you say, everyone that doeth evil is good in the sight of the Lord, and he delights in them, or where is God of judgment? So he's going at them in so many different directions for what they have become. Now, here is where it gets a little better. Behold, I will send my messenger. I send Malachi, basically. And he shall prepare the way before me, said the Lord, whom you seek, shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant, whom you delight in. Behold, he shall come, said the Lord of hosts. Don't know who he's talking about there. Is he talking about John the Baptist? Maybe. But who may abide the day of his coming, and who shall stand when he appeareth? Because he could be Jesus too. For he is like a refiner's fire and like a fuller's soap. Now, when you talk about refiner's fire, what you're doing is you take a metal that is, whatever. You can take the iron ore and it's in a rock or whatever, but if you get it hot, you can separate the rock and the metal. For example, there are types of turquoise that have silver in them. The silver and the turquoise live together, and so the piece of jewelry can have silver in it naturally running through the turquoise. You take that and you heat it up, and you'll separate the turquoise from the silver. And so they were taking iron ore and separating the iron from that. But the other thing that can happen, and this is kind of more of like chemistry almost than whatever, but if you take oil and water and you mix them, they will layer out. If you take metals of different kinds of metals, let's say it's got silver and copper and whatever, and gold, and you heat it up, that metal will separate according to its different weights. And so you'll have a layer of silver, a layer of copper, a layer of gold, whatever, right? So that's what he's talking about, the refiner's fire, of then going in there, getting it hot enough to clean it up and do this kind of thing. But he's going to act like that. And he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver, and he shall purify the sons of Levi, and purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness. Then shall the offering of Judah and Jerusalem be pleasant of the Lord, as in the days of old, as in former years. And I will come near to you in judgment, and I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers, and against the adulterers, and against false swearers, and against those that oppress the hireling in his wages, the widow and the fatherless, and that turn aside the stranger from his sight, and fear not me, said the Lord of hosts. So all these people, if you're doing these things, I'm after you. If you're don't fear him, if you're adulterer, if you lie, if you steal wages, do all those things. For I am the Lord, and there's a good statement right here too. I change not. So God is saying that I am the same yesterday, today, forever. Last week they were singing a song. I was standing next to Brian, and one of the things that she kind of alluded to was the way that I like to say it is God is a verb. When he says I am, that's kind of an answer to any questions. Like, were you God back then? I am. Were you God today? I am. Were you God tomorrow? I am. God is saying it has always been and always will be. He is a verb. I am. Whereas all we can say is, well, I was born in 1962 and there's my tombstone and whatever. But God is saying, or did we lose power? There we go. But God is saying that I am unchanging. I am the same all these times. And so, therefore, you sons of Jacob are not consumed. Because in other words, he's saying, I remember them. And you get a little credit because I remember them. You may be messing up, but I remember your fathers and forefathers and mothers, and you're going to get a little grace because of that. Even from the days of your fathers you have gone away from my ordinances and have not kept them. Return unto me, and I'll return unto you, said the Lord of hosts. But ye said, where shall we return? Well, will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But you say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. You're cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring all the tithes in the storehouse. There may be meat in my house, and prove me now herewith, said the Lord of hosts. And this is one of the images that we also need to take out of Malachi, because it's an incredible statement about tithing. It can be used in tithing sermons and stuff, but he says, bring your tithe into the storehouse. There may be meat in my house, and prove me now herein, said the Lord of hosts. You tithe, God, not me, but God, will not open the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall be not room enough to receive it. As you can kind of imagine, bring your tithe here, small amount, but whatever you got, bring your tithe here, and the windows are going to have tithes coming in. It's going to flood into the storehouse. Because we all have this image, and they did, about a storehouse is you put your stuff in it and you fill it up. And then throughout the year you start using that grain and stuff up, and so that's what a storehouse does. God's image is the storehouse is going to be different, because it's going to start kind of overflowing, just because you're bringing a little bit. You can have an empty storehouse, you bring your tithe in, and it's going to overflow. The blessings that he's giving don't have to be material. But he's saying, if you trust me, I'll take care of you. If you trust me with that, that male, you'll still have offspring. If you trust me with this problem, I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it. And so I think that's probably a good point for me to kind of stop here, but I did want to kind of get to that, because he said there's not going to be enough room to get it. You're not going to be able to have a big enough basket to carry the blessing. You're not going to have, I'm going to overflow it. And so it's one of those things that he's kind of turning from, look, you've done all this, but guess what? I'm a forgiving God. You straighten this out. I'm a forgiving God. Trust me. Tithe. Trust me. Do those things. So yes, we still have churches. Yes, we still have temples. Yes, we carry the temple within us. We are a temple of God. But the blessings are, we can't, we can't say, oh, well, I didn't get this or that or whatever, because we kind of get into things of saying, this is what I think I need. But the reality is he's saying he will meet your needs and he will do it to overflowing. You just got to trust him and do it. And you won't understand what it is sometimes until the blessing makes truth later. Whether that blessing, like I said, is financial or relational or emotional or whatever it is, he'll meet your needs. And that's what they're getting to. And yes, we still need to tithe because we still have to pay the light bills and the other things. But the purpose of this building is for outreach and to bring other people to God. And as long as you're keeping that as your center focus, he'll take care of it. But that's kind of the start of Malachi and kind of what I could pull out today. And any questions, thoughts? Okay, we've got communion.